digital drawing and painting. This is just a video where I'm going to go over your still life project part 2. This is the last part of it, and it's talking about color and value together. So before I get started here with our project and file organization, just make sure you watch the clip from the e-session where I go over how to duplicate your file on the desktop and on the iPad. So here, bring over my file folder. So I have all my files for this class, all my folders. And then in this folder here, come on, work with me. I have assignment 2 and 3 together, still life project. I have part 1 saved as its own Photoshop file, and I have part 2 saved as its own Photoshop file as well. So make sure you have that. I'm going to go ahead and show some things on the desktop version today about adding color as value here. So let me get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of this video as well, so you're just going to be hearing my voice throughout this. Bye. So here, I'm going to go ahead and adjust my layers panel so I can just see it a little bit more. I can really check out what I have here. What I recommend for this project is having each object on its own layer that I drew out. So I already have those good and set up. And then when you're adding color, you might need to use a few different layers to add up the color, and I'll explain that in a little bit with my iPad version. But here I have the ribbon that I traced out. And then I have the color panel that I'm working from, our panel as layer. So I have that layer I'm working from. And then every once in a while, I'm going to bring this photo back just by using that eye to toggle it on and off. So I can view that and then not view it. So what I did here before I got started, I zoomed in using that zoom tool to really get into the space that I'm working in. On the side here, I'll talk about those little swatches in just a moment. But for my photo, I brought that back because here I'm using color as value. So what I mean by that is that I have some different shades of yellow that are gonna be applied onto the yellow for the ribbon to help show, oh, the light is here more, and then maybe there's a shadow down here. Same thing, using a darker yellow here, and then a lighter, brighter yellow on top. So I'm just gonna hold down the space bar and just show you what I'm talking about there. That space bar helps move it around on the desktop. So if I turn off my color panel, I can't see those colors anymore. But going back to what I have here, I started to lay out some color swatches. Eventually this is going to be erased so that I can start applying color in my artwork. So in this layer here, my color ribbon, for my swatches, what I used is the eyedropper tool to, on my photo, once that is in view, it's toggled for view on, I just selected a space to pick up that yellow. Then I would go back to my brush tool. I'm using a hard round brush right now, 12 pixels. And I just put a swatch of that color off to the side so that as I'm working, I could go between using my eyedropper tool, selecting that color, going back to my brush tool. Maybe I want that darker yellow in here. And then as I'm working, filling in that space, to go back here, all I'm going to do is go to my color swatches on the side, my color panel. I'm going to just click a little darker, and I would apply that down in the space here. I'm using a trackpad for drawing and coloring in here, and it's just the same thing with a mouse. So my trick always is zoom in crazy amounts. Use the holding down the space bar to move. Bring back my paintbrush here and starting to add in that color. Something you're going to notice is I'm painting over the black, but it's not going over it. And here's the reason why. My ribbon color is behind the ribbon layer. If I moved the ribbon drawing, then that would show. So if I have it up in front on the top, it's hiding behind. So something cool with digital art is you really get to hide the mess. And then on the side here, I can just go and use my, woo, not on the right spot. But now I get to show, edit, undo eraser, or the shortcut for that is Command Z, which is going to be your best friend here. So now that I'm on my ribbon color layer, then I can use my eraser and go over the ribbon color to bring those black lines back. And I might need to make this a little bit smaller pixels so I can really clean that up. So for assignment 2, just a sneak peek here of what it looks like as you first start. Make sure as you go into different objects, and I'm going to zoom out here, don't need to focus on the detail. The big thing here is I'm looking for big splotches of color, and then if there's a shadow or if there's highlights capturing that. And that will, I'm going to give an example here in just a moment, but I'm going to go back, turn that off. You can see the progress that I'm making so far. If I was working here, where there's a bunch of crazy colors together, I would decide what I want. And I'm going to go with gray because I can put a nice really highlight bright gray in the middle here, and then towards the side where the light is not showing, so there's a shadow, I can make that a darker gray. For the beauty spray, all I need to do before I add color is make a new layer, put it behind, double click to change. I'm just going to put abbreviations, color, and I'm actually going to do the lid on its own, and then I'm going to do the body of the bottle separately so that I can erase and really clean that up there when I work in the purple versus the gray at the top. So this is just a good way to start getting organized, really building up those layers, having the color on another layer, and having the drawing separate. So before I move on to the iPad, I'm going to zoom out here, hold down space bar. It will look like I have a lot to do, but as I start going, and I'm going to make a note here, I'm just going to draw this right on my photo. Nope, won't let me. That's okay. New layer, light example. Your light source is going to be a huge part here. So right now, I can tell from the different shadows that are being casted on the wall, the shadows that are being casted from objects, and then on the object itself, that my light is coming from here. So just something to keep in mind. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. My light is coming from here. So as I'm working on those objects, I would put the lighter color here, that more medium gray here, and then the darker gray on the side here. When I go into my ribbon, like I was talking, there's that light being reflected here, it's bright, and then that shadow being casted here from the candle holder. With the candle holder, I have a good chunk that's going to be light, and then maybe a small part medium, and then darker. So what does that look like in play? Let's take a look at my Photoshop example on the iPad. So here we're taking a peek at what this looks like a little bit more specific on an iPad. So here I have my finished still life, different than my first one because I like to do projects two different ways and make things harder for myself. But at the same time, it's really good practice. So big thing I wanted to show on the iPad version is that I have my line art as the two top layers, so those overlap everything else, because on some of my drawings, and if I eyeball this, you can see right in there, like all of that like messiness that's all hidden, and it's hidden with my line art that's on top. So something cool about digital art is that you can hide the mess and then show the craftsmanship, show that skill. So I have my line art on top. The color are in different layers. I broke the spray bottle one into a few different layers so I could really clean up the edges on that one. The brush tool that I used for that, because I was just playing around, was the watercolor flat. And then I played with the opacity to paint down and create those different values. So I'll show that in just a moment here. And I have my background as the very bottom layer because it's in the back. And I just filled that with the paint bucket, filled it gray to just complement what I had here. So the big thing I want to talk about on this guy is my light source. So just by the look of it, you can see that that light is also coming from the right. I have this kind of like light gray, middle gray, dark gray at the top of the spray bottle that I painted in. I have the yellow of the mug going down. So I'm using some different shades of yellow to show the realistic value of how that light is changing the object. And then also on the Lysol container, I have like on one part the lighter where the light's hitting, and then the darker values with the shadows. I even included the shadow of the mug there. So one thing I did here that's a little bit different than my desktop version is that I continued to work from the photo, so toggling it on and off to check. But towards the end, when I started to get a lot of colors there, what I needed to do was actually pull that object, that photo, and make it smaller. And I just did that by clicking on the transform tool, which makes the image larger and smaller. So just taking a peek at that. And when I was done, I pressed done. So I made that really small and pushed it off to the side. My name is on the bottom right. And then before we export this document and save it, I'm going to go back to the home, the three little dots next to it, click on that, rename your file so it says like your name. So I should put Satari on mine, color still life part 2, save it, go back into that document, click on the little outbox in the top right, publish and export as a JPEG maximum quality, and then export it. And that will save it as a JPEG on your iPad. For the desktop, it's just file, save as JPEG. So the iPad version that you're seeing here is very slimmed down from the full Photoshop that we have on the desktop. But since this big project here is really focusing on color and value, doesn't matter if you're using an iPad, it doesn't matter if you're using a desktop version, doesn't matter if you're using a mouse or trackpad like I was, or if you have a fancy drawing tablet, whatever you have, you're going to make it work. The big thing here, since we're in the first part of experimenting with color, when you're in a layer, so I'm just going to go to the mug here, and I have my yellows, really play with those swatches on the side. Try out some different colors. If I painted over on accident the Lysol container, not a big whoops, because I can just take that eraser on that layer and just go right over that without erasing, because it's on its own layer. Same thing here. I can get rid of those swatches at the end from each layer. So just some really cool things here as we're learning, really experimenting and giving this a try. The best way to learn Photoshop and what's available are just playing around with some different brushes. I recommend the hard round or the watercolor flat for this project. So we will get more into brushes at a later time. But that's everything I wanted to go over for this project. If you have questions, make sure you skim through this video by watching the entire thing and checking the steps that are on Blackboard. Have a great day.